So, my name's Forrest Melton. I work at the University of Arizona Cancer Center. I identify as black, straight male. I am on the board of Ben's Bells, and it's a nonprofit that their whole mission is kindness, education, like acknowledging kindness, like creating spaces for kindness, and like making that permeate through all kinds of different environments and worlds. I'm also on the board of Sounds Academy, and Sounds Academy does music education for at-risk youth, inner city youth, and really becoming an outlet. It started as kind of like a after-school program, but in schools that don't have an arts program, we become the arts program, oftentimes. So I do a lot of things. I'm also working on a public health degree so that hopefully someday I can be a researcher looking at health disparities, specifically African Americans. So those are some of the things that I do. It tends to be a lot. I'm trying to think if I missed anything, but yeah. Other than that, I am a budding philanthropist, aspiring philanthropist, and socialite. I love humans. I'm an extrovert. Yeah. I had always worked hard to get good grades, but believe it or not, it was a lot quieter, a lot less extroverted, and I had the same counselor all 4 years, but it wasn't until I had straight A's pretty much every year, and somewhere around junior year, she was like, "You have really good grades," and I'm like, "I know." But she said something like, "You're the best kept secret in this school," and I was like, "Most people know I'm smart. You don't know I'm smart. I'm a secret because you didn't realize I don't look like what a smart person would look like to you. Like, we've got all the Asians and all the white females and all those people were in the top of the class, and then like me just kind of stuck in there, and it was probably really unusual for her because especially a black male are seen as causing trouble, or we're just trying to keep them out of trouble, and especially at my school where we had a riot my senior year. So I think she was looking at me as like another one of those kids, and I'm sure I suffered. I'm sure she suffered too by not really pouring into me and like developing me. She always was a little bit distanced, and of course I suffered because I didn't get the tutelage that would have really helped. Fortunately, I still made it out of that situation. It's really interesting, a person that's supposed to be there to help you isn't always equipped to do so, especially when they've got this lens of racism that permeates all of society. So I don't necessarily blame her, but it's too bad. It's so interesting because college doesn't seem that far ago. You know, it was the 2000s, and so I was religious at the time. I was Christian, and I met this other girl who was Christian. My parents are from Bama, her parents are from Bama, and I was like, oh man, we have so much in common. And we were both athletes, and we dated for a while, and then as it eventually got back to her parents that I was black, it became a problem, and I was like, it's not a big deal, like, this isn't 1965, but it really was a big deal, and this was eye-opening to me. This was probably my first major like decisions being made based on my race type of thing. Like the high school counselor, I could just brush that off as like, oh, like she doesn't know, like she's ignorant. But this was like, her dad was racist. Like, he dropped the N-word more than once. Like, there were accusations about me based on the color of my skin, and it was really shocking. And eventually, we broke up. She broke up with me because her parents eventually were like, got all the family together, like aunts and uncles and grandparents, and they were like, if you don't like break up with this dude, you're cut off, like you're disowned, you're not part of the family anymore. And I was like, does that still happen? That's crazy. And eventually, she told me that this was what it was. And also in my head, I thought like, like love conquers all, like we can get through this together kind of a thing. But the fact that she didn't feel like she could do that really, it really opened me up to, wow, there are people who racism is so strong that it's, for me, I'm used to it. And so we're like, we got to get past this racism thing. But for people, like white people, sometimes they can't actually deal with that. Like, I don't want to say that all white people are a certain way, but this girl specifically couldn't be like, all right, we're going to get through this together. Like, she needed that kind of security or that kind of whatever, that kind of like club, that unit, that to be part of that squad, like to lose her privilege was not something she could deal with. And for me, I was like, oh yeah, like I've been on my own, like in terms of, like I've got family, my family's great, but it didn't feel like, for me, I was like, okay, like another thing to get through, this is gonna suck, but we got it. But for her, it was like she's losing her privilege, she's losing something, she's gonna be without all of this that bolsters her up. And so that was really devastating at the time. It really opened my eyes to kind of the broader network of racism and society and how like overt racism and then like covert racism, like I remember her mom came out and talked to us and she was like, don't take it personal, like it's not you. And I'm like, it's not me? Like, what does that even mean? So, like, even her mom, like, couldn't tell how, like, overt this was. To her, it was just like, this is how it is, and your life's gonna be hard if you're in a biracial relationship or whatever. And and she's trying to protect us or protect her daughter or whatever. And it's so interesting how even that kind of like plays into the system. Like people who are silent are only playing into the racism. So yeah, that was wild. I try not to think about it. So Ben's Bells, our whole mission is kindness. And some people get that confused a lot with like being nice and like just getting along. But what happens is when people are being nice, it's actually avoiding conflict. It's like telling someone, it's like someone has food in their teeth and you just ignore it because you're just being nice. You're just trying to like not rock the boat, stuff like that. Whereas like kindness is like if you are really standing for someone, if you really want the best for you and for me, then you are going to have the hard conversations. You're gonna be like, hey, I gotta tell you, like, your hair is terrible. Or like, there's something in your teeth. Or like, what you said to that person wasn't cool. Like, you know it's gonna be awkward and you might hurt someone's feelings, but you're doing it to be authentic and to be real and to actually be for that person instead of avoiding the conflict. And I think this comes up a lot in these conversations around race. And there's a lot of like avoidance and like, let's just ignore it, let's just get by, let's not talk about race. But that kind of avoidance of the conversation really perpetuates the racism instead of being like, all right, tell me your story. Like, what really happened? How do you feel about this? And then being able to listen to people's responses, Black people's responses, like that is really difficult for some, but it is so important in the grand scheme of things, especially if you say that you love someone like that is Black, if you say that you have black friends, go talk to them. Ask them about Black Lives Matter. Like, ask them if they've had any confrontation with the police, and be able to, like, also, man, I've had a few people reach out to me about, like, hey, if I don't post on Facebook, does that mean I'm a bad person? I'm not, like, supporting the cause? And I think that's a really good, nice versus kind conversation, because they want to be nice and not be outspoken and not brush anyone the wrong way. They don't want to put themselves out there. But if they're really, like, being kind to the people that they support, like us minorities, and they want to communicate also to the people that don't agree, I think the kindest thing to do is to be authentic with yourself. And you could do it in a really gentle way and be like, this is how I feel, this is where I stand. But I think you got to look at what are you resisting and why? Like, why don't you want to do that thing? And what excuse are you coming up with? Because that might really reveal a lot about your motivations, and the answer is usually to go forward into the discomfort, generally speaking. So kind is a really more difficult way to live than nice. And that's kind of what we try to communicate with Ben's Bells, because sometimes people hear be kind and they're like, oh, you're just kind of brushing aside people's feelings. But it's like, no, it's actually much harder to confront what is messed up in the world. High school, I wrestled 103. And then I had like a prolonged growth spurt. And in college, I was probably like 5'8", 5'9", like 180. And so in my head, I was just like an innocent, forgettable, small kid. And I had multiple people. I was in this club. It was a volunteer club. And we would have meetings like once a week. But there was a few people in that club who were like, I thought you were so scary before I met you. And I was like, what? It literally doesn't make sense. But as I got older and I realized like, oh, I'm a large black man. And once I started understanding the perceptions of me, especially like, encounters with the police and like seeing just like how aggressive some people can be, and like seeing stuff on the news of our species getting killed and aggressed, I really understood like, oh, they were scared of me because I'm a large black man. At the time, I didn't even really understand. I was like, oh, they just didn't know me, and you are scared of people before you know them. But then I was like, I'm not scared of people. And but it really is a clear example of how persistent this stereotype of black men is. Just same as high school counselor, like there's an already always listening of what this person's gonna be like. Like there's already a perception before you get to this person. And I think that's a lot of the problems with the police. I think they're already amped up, they're militarized, they're ready for combat. And then they see a large black person and they have a perception that this person's is a threat. And I think we show up to a lot of people as a threat. And it really takes away from what we're able to do in the world. It takes away from how far we can get and who's gonna get the raise, or like who's gonna, just those kind of really simple, subconscious microaggressions or micro decisions that occur before people really realize they're doing it. The impact is usually on us as black men, and that shows up in a really large scale with police brutality, but it also shows up in a really small scale with just general interactions. And fortunately, these people specifically, they knew me long enough and they got comfortable with me enough to say, like, hey, I actually was scared of you. And it kind of makes me think, how many other people are scared of me and never told me? And just like, how many interactions did I miss out on because people were scared of me? And if people could be scared of me, where I think my default is happy, imagine someone whose default outlook or perception, I guess, is neutral. Way more people probably think they're scary or are afraid of them. So it's really, I don't even know how you fix that. It's crazy. It's so subconscious, but it shows what kind of society we live in. Yeah, that whole I don't see color thing is really interesting because it just feels like a way for people to excuse like inaction or brush off like the fact that this thing is happening, this racism thing is happening. And it's only something a privileged person can do, to be like, oh, I don't see color. And I'm like, well, good for you. I wish I could be like, I don't show up as color, but I can't just simply ignore the fact that this thing is happening. And I think it really, what it does is it takes a lot of people out of the conversation. It takes people out of the game. And that that's more of the resistance, more of the like avoidance. And that only bolsters the people who are overtly racist. And I don't think people really realize, I don't think their intention is to be avoidant, but I think it makes them feel good about themselves to say, well, I don't see color, when it would be a lot better to acknowledge like this is happening and what can I do about it, and like, tell me your story. So that's a whole thing. That's a whole podcast probably. But it's not the thought that counts. So there's this thing we talk about in Ben's Bells. We didn't make it up, but I have a lot of conversations with Jeanette. She's the founder. She's remarkable. But there's the golden rule, which is do unto others as you'd have them do. Do unto others as you do unto yourself? Yeah, do unto yourself. Do unto others as you would do unto yourself. Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, sometimes if I'm an extrovert and I would love someone like waking me up early in the morning and jumping on my bed, and that's my favorite way to be woken up, it would be terrible if I did that to someone who likes to sleep in till noon. And so the platinum rule is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. And it's really taking into account what people want. And you're not gonna know that automatically. It's going to take some conversation of like how a lot of communication and a lot of awkward communication probably of like what would you like? How would you prefer? What would you like to be called? How do you identify? Stuff like that. Because it's the thought that counts isn't good enough. We have to be better than just having good intentions, because good intentions doesn't get the job done. It's a start. It's a good start. But I think it's easy to hide behind like, well, I tried. Or like, well, I did this thing. Oh, this is a thing that happens a lot. My dad passed away a few years ago. And I got the question a lot of like, let me know if there's anything I can do for you. And I was like, okay. I don't know what I need. Maybe I need a lot of things, maybe I don't. But I think in those people's hearts, they were like they had a good intention of like being like, I want to reach out to Forrest. But man, after like 5 or 10 of those, it kind of drove me a little bit nutty. So I was like, man, maybe I'm just gonna start making up stuff like, let me know if there's anything I can do for you. Like, you can Venmo me $50. But it's frustrating because that specifically like puts the onus on to the person that's suffering to like be aware of of themselves and their needs, and it puts a lot of pressure back on the person that's already suffering. So it's like the thought that counts is like, whatever, fine. But it's much, much, much better to have an intention and go beyond that and be like, I wonder what that person needs. How can I figure out what this person needs? And to strike up a conversation rather than just putting the pressure onto them to figure themselves out. You know, there was a lot to get over and get past. There's a lot of reasons not to come here today. But I really felt like if I could tell a story that relates to someone and it changes the way they think, if I could have like just a small impact on anybody, then that would be worth it. And I want to do whatever it takes to get to this kind of point where we hit some kind of critical mass where there is some change that actually happens. So I'm hoping that there's an impact on somebody somewhere, and even if it doesn't lead to like the demilitarization of police, then maybe someone's heart can change, someone's perspective can be opened up, and I think that's all we can do in this life is just try to reach one person. So I felt like this was a cool opportunity for that. Yeah.